Hello and welcome to Let's Chat About You today. And I have a very special guest from Boston in the USA. And her name is Lauren Ennis. Hello, Lauren. How are you today?
Great, thanks. How about yourself? Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm really excited. I've never had an American, no, that's true. I have had one American author before you, but this is my first lady American author, and I'm very, very thrilled. And just as a little introduction, I actually posted something on Memoir Writers' Facebook page and wanting to invite other writers onto and Let's Chat About You rather than just English authors. And Lauren replied to me, and I was really delighted that somebody actually took up the banner and waved it for the USA. So very, very welcome to you, Lauren. Thank you for joining us today. Just before I continue, this is I think the 33rd episode or 33rd podcast of Let's Chat About You today. And just to remind our listeners that the idea of this YouTube channel is to encourage indie authors to have their voices heard. So many indie authors' voices are unheard, and many are very shy, and they've never done an interview. So this is an opportunity in the quiet space of, this is not a recording studio, to give indie authors a chance to tell their stories, to be heard, to reach a wider audience, and hopefully to increase their sales because authors write because they love to write. But another big pleasure is when they sell their books and people love them and acknowledge them and review them as well. So let's start and let's chat with Lauren Ennis on Let's Chat About You today. So before we begin, Lauren, I just wanted to introduce Lauren and tell you a little bit about her background, although I'm sure she can do, but I just picked up a few things and I was really very impressed with all the things that Lauren has done. So Lauren seems to move very effortlessly between centuries, continents, and creative forms. By day, she navigates the structural world of law, but by night, she steps into the boundless realm of storytelling, bringing forgotten histories, unsung heroes, and extraordinarily ordinary people back to life. Would you say that's true, Lauren?
No, absolutely. I mean, I have been absolute history nut since I was yay high. And that's really what fostered my love of writing was hearing these just the most outlandish and outrageous stories that are just truth. To me, history is so much more interesting than anything that we could just make up on our own. And you get to meet some of the most fascinating and influential characters. So definitely.
Okay, thank you for that. So Lauren has written plays, screenplays, and even a comic book with work performed as far away as NYU in Shanghai. Is NYU New York University Shanghai? Is that correct?
That is, they have a sister campus they opened in Shanghai, I want to say about 10 years or so ago.
Okay. And just quickly, how did your play come to be performed out there?
Honestly, I just all my plays and screenplays were published through an indie publisher in South Africa, and it just happened to be that this student organization happened to find the script. They must have just been looking for indie plays that had available rights, and it was just serendipity.
Wow, that's something. Shanghai. Have you ever been to Shanghai?
No, no. I've been to pretty limited, but just some traveling around Europe for the most part.
Okay, okay. Yeah, because Shanghai is a very phenomenal city now, it really is. I used to go to Shanghai way back in the 1980s and 1990s, and then in the 2000s. And for me, it was a real privilege to see the changes that have taken place in Shanghai from being really old French colonial parts of Shanghai and the British parts, and then the Chinese parts, and then suddenly to see that whole it's become like a metropolis. It's really, truly, when I use the word amazing, it is an amazing city. So I hope you get to go there one day.
Oh, absolutely.
But now, besides all the comic and the scripts that she's written, this is Lauren's very first indie debut book called A Boy's Best Comrade. And she brings us a powerful, I'd say, heart-wrenching tale set in 1930s Moscow and is told through the eyes of the loyal eyes of a small dog named Sasha. I'm not going to say anything more because I think, um, as Lauren has written the book, she can tell her story about the book much better than I can. So we're going to explore today the stories behind the story, the history, the craft, the research that I'm sure has gone into actually writing this story, and the remarkable creative journey of a writer who lives at the crossroads of what I'd call discipline and imagination. So once again, welcome, and I'm really looking forward to you telling us a great deal about yourself in a very short period of time. So let me start by posing you this question. Your work often brings forgotten or overlooked moments of history to life. So tell me, what draws you to these unsung corners of the past, and how do you balance historical truth with emotional storytelling, especially when writing through the eyes of a dog in Stalinist Moscow? Tell us about this.
Well, as I said, I've always been an absolute history junkie. And what draws me to those stories is, like I said, that so many of them are so much stranger than fiction. And even just to see how that domino effect of how one small event can domino its way into sometimes either catastrophic or amazing events that affect so many more people. And also, what draws me to a lot of these sort of unsung heroes and unsung episodes from history is I love the idea of exploring ordinary people trying to survive or extraordinary circumstances. Those are always some of my favorite books. I love War and Peace. I love Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
I love Nightingale. Just seeing how do average people cope when they're thrust into a situation that is so outside the realm of their experience or outside the realm of anything they could ever anticipate. And I think that's really where we learn who people really are oftentimes is when they're put in these extreme situations and put under duress and forced to reckon with their own moral code and their own need to survive.
I was just asking you, talking about your story is about very ordinary people set in Stalinist Moscow, about a situation that they, in fact, have no control over. And there are so many people around the world who have had very similar stories in terms of not to that particular story, but to the fact that they've got no control of anything. Events overtake them, situations overtake them, and they've got to learn to actually handle them. And when we read these stories, we just wonder, how do people manage to actually cope with these situations? So tell us a little bit about A Boy's Best Comrade, and how did that story all begin?
So honestly, it's kind of an odd story because I never thought I would ever write anything for younger readers. I was very intimidated by the idea of writing for kids because it's such a tricky needle to thread. And especially where I tend to like to do more of these heavier, weighty topics and historical topics. But I'm a crazy dog lady and have way too much dog merchandise around my house, including a dog trivia calendar. And one of
Okay.
the facts for one of the days was, did you know that there are packs of stray dogs in Moscow that have taught themselves how to use the metro and how to actually commute? And they even commute in and out of the city. They've put trackers on them to see where they go and what they do. And they have a whole routine worked out. Some of them go in and out of the city, some of them go to different neighborhoods, but they always follow this routine. And they somehow manage, I think mostly through smell, to be able to just navigate and memorize all the routes. Even when the routes change, they're able to keep on navigating it.
Hmm.
And you can even see documentaries of them online. There's even a video game. It's very old school pixelated kind of documentary where you get to play as one of them. And they even, when I looked into these dogs, it's even been noted that they have this whole sophisticated system worked out where they even run con artist scams that they'll send the cute little dogs out to fake sick or to try to nuzzle up to people and steal food from them that way. And if that doesn't work, or if they have someone who looks more intimidating, they'll send a bigger, scarier dog out to try to scare the person into dropping it. Oh yeah, there's entire documentaries. They have film and everything. It's wonderfully insane.
And what about this game? Is it available anywhere in our
I
country?
know the trailer you can find on YouTube, and it's just called like Metro Moscow Dogs or something similar to that.
Yeah.
or Moscow dogs. And they even have them in the little furry hats and everything. It looks like something out of the 80s. It's hilarious. And you just get to play as a little dog and steal food and jump the tracks and all these things. It's, oh my God, it's too much fun.
Have you ever discovered how many dogs there are in Moscow?
I thought it was, oh gosh, there's thousands. It's, I believe in Eastern Europe and places in Central Europe, there's a far higher stray population.
Yes.
But I believe that this core group who are able to do this, I believe it's somewhere between 500 and 800 dogs that have taught themselves how to do this.
That is amazing. That is, well, dogs are very smart. That's for sure. Very smart, very loving, very loyal. So tell us, how did you come to write this particular story, though?
So once I had read about that, it kept bugging me. I kept thinking, well, where did they go? What did they do? What would that be like? And I kept thinking, oh gosh, somebody has to write something about this. And I kept picturing in my head that it would be a great cartoon. It would be a great, like old school Disney or like a Don Bluth movie from the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
That would, old school 2D animation, it would be fantastic. And I kept thinking somebody should write it. And then I happened to be in between projects and thought, well, maybe I'll give it a go. But then I was thinking, well, it can't be just straight shenanigans of them running amok on the subways. I mean, that's great for a short film or clips or something or a video
Mm.
game, but you can't substantiate a whole novel on that.
Mm.
So that's when I started looking into it. And like I said, with love of history, but especially I have a weird fascination with Russian history and Russian literature.
Mhm.
So then to me, it was the perfect opportunity to marry those two interests. So that's when I came up with the idea of setting it back during Stalin's terror of the 1930s and doing it from the perspective of a dog who's not part of these street dogs, but who's forced into that situation and encounters them as part of a larger story after her family is arrested by the NKVD.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us a little bit about, let's say, the nub of the story. I don't want you to tell us all about it, but the part that really brings that period of time to life and talks about what happened to the family. And the dog is called Sasha in the what type of dog is Sasha?
So Sasha was inspired by my dog because when I was trying to think of what this sort of main character of a dog should be like, and
Mm.
I immediately started thinking, well, maybe if I can think of the right name, then the rest will come to me. And
Mm.
then racking my brain, and then finally I realized, oh, right, I have a dog with a Russian name. What am I thinking? She's right in front of me. So that was the idea to make her a shepherd and to infuse a lot of her characteristics. She was under socialized and very skittish when we first got her.
Mm.
And, she's much more, even now, quiet and much more nurturing in that kind of personality type of a more submissive dog.
Yeah.
So I decided I would try to bridge that personality with something like Mrs. Brisby in Secret of Nam and that sort of maternal caretaker kind of a character.
Yeah, yeah. So Sasha befriends, well, one of the children in the family. Is that right? What
Right. What
happens to the
happens?
family? Don't tell me too much because I don't want to give it
No,
away.
no, no. I'm only spoiling the first two chapters. So in chapter one, you see that she's living with this young couple, working couple, and they're finally having a good night and they're finally able to celebrate New Year's after decades of no holidays whatsoever allowed in the Soviet Union. But then, of course, in the middle of the celebrations, the secret police arrive and take them away without warning. And then when a new family comes into the same apartment, because of course the state controls all property and who owns and gets to rent what apartment and
Mm.
places people in there. So then when a new family gets placed in there, it happens to be that she meets them and they take her in. And then
Okay,
the story goes from there, following what happens when this new family runs into the same problems.
okay. So this is a cliffhanger. We're not going to be talking about this any further.
Oh no, we can. I mean, I'm pretty open book. I have no, so I mean, if you want to hear more, I wasn't sure how much.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because so when the first family were taken away, was Sasha left in the apartment? Oh, did she go
So
off to the
she's
street?
so she's off, but she stays pretty much living in the alleyway and the stoop, waiting for them to come home.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. So when the new family come in, she thinks, oh, a new family, let me go and say hello to them.
Well, it's more that she sees that somebody's coming in because some of the other local animals have said, so they're not coming back and new people are going to be put in there. And she's mortified and she's like, how dare you? This is my family's home. I don't want these people in there. So she sneaks in and tries to hide in the apartment and protect the place.
Ah,
And then they find her. And then, it's almost like something out of ET where the little kid sees this, is like, oh my gosh, it's a monster. And she's like, what is this kid doing here?
okay.
And
Yeah.
then, they become fast friends and they become family. But then, um, what happens is the father in that family is a doctor in Moscow and discovers there's a TB outbreak. And you see this all the time in Soviet history with the bureaucracy that if you just couldn't talk about things that were really happening. You see it in Dr. Zhivago when there's a typhus outbreak. You even see it in if you ever look into the real life Andrei Chikatilo case or Citizen X, the movie based off that, where you can't talk about the fact that there's a killer on the loose because it will make the state look bad. So when Andre, the father, decides, I'm going to tell people there's an epidemic and we need to address this because people are going to get sick and die, that's when his superiors have him brought in, and that's when the police arrive for
All right.
just trying to do the right thing.
Right. So the family gets taken away, but this time there's something else that's left behind with Sasha. Correct.
Yes, and that's their young son, Yuri, her best friend.
Okay, so this is where the story will really kick off, I believe. What happens to
Yes,
Yuri and Sasha?
right.
So readers, you're gonna have to buy the book to find out what happens to Yuri and Sasha. What will become of them? Will they survive this whole period of time when the parents are away? So you're gonna have to buy this book, and I think the book is on Amazon, is it not?
It is.
Yes, yes, great. Okay, so we can talk about that a little bit later on. So you've written. Thank you for that. That was just a little soup song, just a little bit of background to the story, and I think there has been a wonderful review about Lauren's book already, which it was really showed how it touched the heart of that reviewer. So I know that you can find the review. I think it's on your website, isn't it, as well?
It is.
Yeah, so we can talk about your website at the end. So you've written plays, you've written screenplays, and even a comic book before stepping into the world of indie fiction. So tell me, how has your background in theatre and film shaped the way you build, I'd say, the scenes in your stories? You build the scenes, you build the tension and the character relationships in A Boy's Best Comrade. Uh, was there a relationship that helped you, or did it just come naturally for you to just write the story? Tell us a
No,
little bit about it.
that absolutely helps me, especially with pacing, because pacing for a novel is difficult, and especially with young readers, you want to be able to put in enough action to keep them engaged, but at the same time, give enough breathing space for those emotional moments to have time to resonate. So that's where I think screenwriting and playwriting were so crucial because you only have a limited period of time to be able to keep an audience engaged and to be able to explain everything without it rambling on too much or the pacing starting to drag. And also just the emphasis on action. I had a professor in college when I took screenwriting. I remember she always said, don't, whatever you do, don't have people just standing around. She said, because people don't do that. She said, focus on what people really do. She said, when you're talking to someone in your kitchen, you're not just standing there talking, you're making
Mm,
coffee, you're washing the dishes, you're
yeah.
looking at the TV. So I always kept that in the back of my head to try to keep it so that it feels more like real life.
Yeah, it's keeping that momentum going all the time, without, in fact, crowding the page as well. It's something I was thinking about in writing, um, allowing the situation to really breathe. I think maybe my way of saying pacing is breathing. I think, when you're pacing, you either breathe very quickly or you breathe very slowly or you breathe in between. So okay, so that's a really good tip for other listeners who want to begin to learn how to write or to write their story, tell me a little bit more about how you connect all of this, how you've connected your past writing with your current, with your latest book.
Okay, definitely. So the past writing, like I said, focused very much on sort of darker, weightier topics in history. So that helped me to be able to bring that in to a different medium and to be able to the focus on dialogue was a great help because I have so much experience where you're screenwriting or you're writing for the stage. It's just action and dialogue. So that helps a lot. Whereas sometimes when you go straight into novel writing, you can get very much caught up into the exposition or into the descriptions. So, and a lot of people get hung up on how do you make this sound like how the people we meet every day actually sound?
Yes.
So that definitely was crucial for me. That gave me a bit of a leg up.
Yeah, because it's interesting you talk about dialogue. In the first novel that I wrote, I realized there wasn't very much dialogue, and I remember my creative writing teacher saying, "Beth, but it's a good story, but nobody's talking to anybody at all." Oh, okay, but I don't know. I don't speak Spanish, so how can I speak to these people who speak Spanish? Yeah,
Right. It's such a hard needle to thread to be able to be that it's not just people talking at each other and that you can actually see where's the setting, what's happening. It's so much a balancing act.
yeah, yeah. That too, is one of I mean, dialogue is so important in storytelling. I have read many authors who write wonderful dialogue. One of my favorite authors is Ernest Hemingway. For me, almost the whole of his story is said through the dialogue. It comes through that dialogue, and it's really, really powerful. I was when I first read him, I thought, oh God, that's too much dialogue. But actually, no. As I started to read it more slowly and more thoroughly, but he's telling the story just by talking to this person, to that person, and it just unwinds and unwinds. Yeah, yeah, dialogue is not always the easiest thing for I think an author to write well. So your screenplay background has really helped you in writing the story. And just remind us, the story that you've written, what age group are you writing for?
So it's directly aimed at ages middle school or middle reader, I would say 9 to 12. But honestly, I wanted it to be broadly family entertainment. Like back when we were kids, when you'd hear, it's fun for the whole family
Yeah.
and to be sort of for the young and young at heart. And that even if you're an adult, you can still get something out of it.
Yes, yes, it's definitely a story that I can relate to very well, and it's a lovely story to read. I will admit to you, I haven't read it, but I will read it. I read the review by Tanya K, and I thought I have to read this. In fact, I love the idea of Sasha and Yuri. One of my other indie authors wrote a book called Beatrice the Time Traveling Collie. Her name is Deborah Murphy, and this dog could talk to her. She could hear her dog talking. She was like the only one who actually could speak to her dog, and the way she wrote about the dog speaking, it was a very novel, excuse the pun, novel way of me hearing a dog speaking to another character in the story, and it really brought that story to life. It was heartfelt. It was warming. It also showed the true nature of the animal. The way the dog spoke, she very clever writer. The way the dog spoke, you got to know the character of that dog and everything about the characteristics of that specific collie dog, because the collies are wonderful little dogs. I think your dog is an Alsatian, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So they're beautiful dogs as well. So yeah, I like that. And I do think that it's not a story just for 12-year-olds. I think any adult who likes a warming story, who likes history, who's interested in that period of time in Russia that was so difficult for many people. And a lot of people would have had ancestors who'd lived through that period of time. I think it's a story for a very, very wide group of people. So yes, well done for that. So
Thank you so much.
yeah, so another question I wanted to ask you, because I think this is what I like about your daytime job and your evening life, dividing your day. So your day job is rooted in what I would say the precision and the structure of law, while your nights belong to your imagination and the world of history or historical worlds. How do these two sides of your life influence each other? And what does that duality bring to the stories that you tell?
Well, when you're in law, you're constantly doing research, so that absolutely helps when you're writing historical fiction. And as you had said, the emphasis on maintaining a sense of discipline, because as much as I would love, there's certain times I come up with an idea and I think this is such a good idea, I can't wait to write. And then I'd actually double check and do a third and fourth source and then realize, oh, that's actually not entirely accurate. This happened a year or two later, or this happened in this other part of the city or in this other part of the USSR. So I can't use it after all. So when you're working in the courts, it's similar in the sense that every court has its own set of rules and you have to be able to know them like the back of your hand. And you have to be able to maintain those deadlines and to be able to do research and to be able to read and interpret a law and think, this is what the law says, but in this particular case, how does that apply?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. So somebody actually asked me this question last week. When you're writing a story set in a particular historical time, it is fiction that you're writing. So I'll just ask the question, how accurate do you really have to be if it is fiction?
To me, I'm sort of a stickler, and I'm that person who, if I find a historical accuracy in a book,
Mm.
I'll go and complain about it, or to my friends, or I'll be like, oh, they didn't do their research. So that keeps me in check and forces me to think, I don't want to be that person who gets called out, or to some reader says, that never would have happened. Because
Mm.
for me, if it's something that, especially if it's something obvious, or if it's something that would take you right out of the story, then it disrupts the whole reading experience. And I
Yeah,
want it to be as immersive as possible for readers.
yeah,
So what I do is I stick to the actual facts of here's what I, put in a scenario. For instance, there's a part where they're in the Moscow Zoo and they're trying to run from the zookeepers and the police in there. And I had researched and found this crazy story that apparently there was a zookeeper in the 1930s in Soviet Moscow who thought it would be a good idea to take an orphan lion cub and raise it in her apartment. And the dogs are sitting there talking about that. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's Canooly's cage down there. And that's the dog who lives with her because the lion, when they finally said you can't be having a massive cat living in a communal apartment and they made her return him to the zoo, the lion was so depressed. So then nobody wanted to come and see it. It wasn't the star attraction anymore.
mm,
So they said, well, let's bring the dog who was living in the apartment with them. Let's bring her. And
yeah.
that's what they did. So you had this dog and lion living in this zoo in the middle of the city. And then when they talk about things like that, oh, did you hear about when the bears in the zoo revolted? Because there was a time that the bears had taught themselves how to break out of the cages, and they were trying to break all the other animals out at one point. So it was this, that's what I love, is bringing in things that seem like they must be fiction
Yeah,
and being able to throw them in so
yeah,
that it still creates that immersive experience while still having enough imagination that it'll keep readers engaged.
yeah, 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 absolutely, yes. And so, where are you going to go? Will there be a follow-up to your first book? Your first,
There will be.
yeah,
Originally, I didn't think there would, but then when I was doing all the research, I happened to stumble across this story about combat dogs in World War II.
yes, yes,
And I mean, of course, everyone employed animals in combat. But what the Soviet Union did was they actually enlisted almost everything that had a pulse had a job. The cats had to guard the granaries. The camels had to, in Kazakhstan, had to be used for transport. They even took, and they wouldn't just take an animal that was given to them, donated to them the way that the Americans and the British and the Allies would. They would just show up at your house, bang on your door, and say, "Comrade, we hear you have a dog. We need it for the Red Army." and that was it. So
Oh,
house pets, circus animals. Actually, one of their favorites was circus dogs because they said they were so used to following orders.
yes. Yes.
And there was one female Soviet dog handler in the Red Army, and she had a background in the stage. And so she didn't just train them the way an ordinary dog handler would train these animals. She trained them using Stanislavski's method acting so that she could give them commands with just her facial expression so that it wouldn't alert the enemy. And she trained them to do sabotage. There was one of her dogs who blew up a Nazi ammunition train and just blew up their entire shipment by leaving bombs on the tracks and lived to tell the tale unscathed.
Oh my God. So your next story is going to be about a little bit of a,
So what it'll be is that Yuri is now in his late teens and enlists in World War II to fight on the Eastern Front. And then when he goes missing in action, his new dog sets off to find him and bring him home, but gets dragged into the Red Army along the way.
okay. I think that's going to be a very, very powerful story as well. I'm very
Thank
excited.
you.
Full of action, full of action. A woman
Definitely.
story in a way, full of action. Thank you. Thank you. I hope that our listeners have got a very clear idea about the kind of stories you write, about your background, and we all look forward to your second book. Any idea when the second book is going to be coming out?
I'm hoping within the next year, 2 years at most. Boys Best Comrade took 2 years, so I'm hoping to get it done faster, but with the 9 to 5, that
Yeah,
can kind of slow
yeah,
things down.
yeah, yeah. Being a full-time writer gives you more opportunity to write, but I think even though you don't work, even though one doesn't work full-time, it's not always easy to just sit down and be disciplined and write 4 or 5 hours a day, as I'm now discovering, really. But
Oh, definitely.
so tell us a little bit about the details of where listeners can buy your books.
So you can buy them pretty much anywhere books are sold. They're on Amazon, they're on Barnes and Noble, they're on Kobo, they're anywhere if you look, if you can just Google it, you should be able to
Okay,
find a means to buy it.
okay, that's great. And your website addresses?
LaurenEnnis.com.
Very simple. So there you go, listeners. You have opportunities to buy the books through Lauren Ennis's laurenennisbooks.com or through, is that right?
Well, you can't buy the books
Oh,
through the
you can't.
website.
Okay. Okay. Because I know some authors will you can buy books through their website as well as through Amazon. So this is just through Amazon you can buy the books. But if you want to find out what's going on in Lauren Ennis's world, please do go onto her website, laurenennisbooks.com. And I believe you can find out a lot more about Lauren than I have had the chance to discuss with her. So, Lauren, is there anything else that you would like to leave the readers or the listeners with before we end our conversation? Any
I'm just
tips that
so
you'd like to give them?
Oh, tips. I would just say whatever you write about, make sure it's something that you love and you fully believe in, as cliche as that sounds. Because I know when I was working on this, I would always hear people say, well, if you're going to do an indie story, you really don't want to write for kids. There's really no market for kids. Or are you going to write something that's set in Stalin's Moscow? Maybe you should do Nazi Germany. More people would know about it, which I'm sure absolutely would have been a powerful story. But to me, if you're trying to chase trends or you're trying to think about marketing before you even go in, you've already lost the plot. To me, you've got to believe in that 110%.
Yes.
And when you do, that will shine through. And it will bring along people who are like-minded, or even people who you never would have expected to connect with along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Being unique is, I think, really important as a writer as well. So thank you once again, Lauren, for joining us. I know how many hours difference is Boston from the UK?
With daylight savings, I think it's 5 now.
Oh, 5 o'clock in
A 5 hour difference, I want
five
to say.
hours, yes. So it's about 2:15 in the afternoon.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us from Boston and USA, and thank you for sharing all your tips and your story with us. A boy's best comrade. Set in
Thank you so
Moscow.
much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Lauren, for joining us and giving us your time and sharing all these wonderful ideas. And I just wish you a lot of luck for your next story. I think it's going to be a whiz winner. I love the
Thank
idea of
you
it
so much.
already.
This
Thank you
was
so much.
lovely.
Thank you. And bye for now. And goodbye, everybody. And look forward to joining all of you again in about 2 weeks' time with a new indie author whose name I will mention later on. So thank you so much. And bye bye, Lauren. Have a lovely day, the rest of the day in Boston.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. Bye for now. So thank you once again for joining me on this new Let's Chat About You today with Lauren Ennis from Boston and US of A. I do hope that you enjoyed it, and I do hope that you will spread the word. And when we do put the video out on YouTube, that you will view it, like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really does help our indie authors to become more known. It's truly difficult in the world of publishing to get known. Most of the time, we tend to hear of the big authors and the big writers, and there are so many wonderful writers who write various genres of stories that never get heard. Writing is not easy. If it was, everybody would be doing it. But it's not, it's also, if you want to learn how to write, pick up the pen, get a piece of paper, a notebook, jot down your thoughts, tell your stories. Every story is worth hearing about, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I hope you really enjoy this. And once again, thank you for joining us and listening. And there will be another lovely indie author coming for the next one. I won't say the name just yet just because. Thank you and bye for now.